Awesome. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to our HOMEFIT WellTalk. I have the pleasure, my name is Cody Robinson. I'm the president and founder of HOMEFIT Personal Training. I have the pleasure of being here with Susan Wood with Physical Therapy in Motion, and then David Puglisi, which is a phenomenal trainer with HOMEFIT. And you have your own brand as well. Is it SOHO Training? Is that right?
SOZO Training. Yep.
Yeah, sorry.
It's all good.
Didn't want to get that one wrong. But
as long as you didn't say so Training, I think we'll be all right.
Well, awesome. Well, so I've actually had the privilege of knowing both of you guys for a while, Susan for a little bit longer, up in the Nashville, kind of Brentwood, Tennessee area. And so what we want to talk about today is GOATA training. Initially, Susan, I'd love for you to kind of take the lead on. Feel free to share anything about your background, kind of, what led you into this direction, but really just kind of jump into what is GOATA. What is it? And we'll just take it from there, to be honest.
Sure. So GOATA is the study of movement through slow motion video analysis. And really, the person who observed movement in this manner was really on a quest to answer the question, how can I move through a lifetime without getting injured for no apparent reason? And so through this slow motion video, he noticed that there was this very distinct pattern between people who seemed to be really stable and durable and those who were fragile and seemed to be really injury prevalent. And so through studying hours of footage of people anywhere from like the developing toddler all the way up to the person in their 60s, 70s, and 80s that are still doing like track and field events, he was able to see this pattern throughout the lifespan and then reverse engineer it. And so really it is like recoding your movement to getting it back to its original blueprint, how we were really wired to move.
Right. Now it makes sense. And so what's the acronym stand for again? Greatest of all time?
It stands Greatest of All Time Actions.
Okay. That makes sense. And the reason I like to make sure we say it is that's just a word, the GOAT is always so profound, I think, in society still. And so, and when you go back, and I know you have a lot of footage and analysis and we can share some things later, but when you go and you start breaking down and kind of looking at some of the top elite athletes, the modalities, the movements, and then the structure and the heel strike, all the things I think really kind of stick out. Which I think is phenomenal. Let's see. I'm trying to think where to go from here because I know we're a little bit limited on time. I guess let's start. So now that we have an origin around it, you said a little bit about how it got started. I guess if you want to, what drew, and I'll ask you, Susan, first, and I'd love to hear, David, your feedback. What drew both of you guys to GOATA? Because you're extremely talented technicians, and both in physical therapy and personal training and exercise physiology across the board. But what drew you to GOATA and kind of why now? Like what made you make the decision to start really studying it and implementing it into your practices?
Yeah, so I was first introduced to GOATA through a podcast that is McKenzie based for physical therapists. So my background is in physical therapy, and I have a specialty in the McKenzie method, which is also a movement system, and it's very practical. And so they had on a really highly trained physical therapist who was also McKenzie trained, and the way she was talking about the movement, it made a lot of sense to me. And they also had the owner of GOATA on there as well. And so they have teamed up together. And, when you hear kind of leaders in the field start to talk about something that is a little bit different, but also complements your current practice, it starts to make you think a little bit about it. They also had on a later podcast, another physical therapist who studied movement and injury. They just took a little bit of a different approach. So in GOATA, we really look at the foot and that as our foundation, and that being where we're going to put a lot of our emphasis, like what's actually happening at the foot, because it's going to set the stage for a cascade of events that's going to go on throughout the body. And if it's the landing's off in the foot, it's going to change the way that your hip gets loaded. It's going to change the way that even your shoulder gets loaded. And so, when those two were back to back, it was really fascinating. They're both talking about the same kind of pattern of landing, right? Like it is, we see this injury prone landing. They just had a different area of focus. One focused on the hip and the other one focused on the foot. And so, we're seeing this kind of information in our, in the physical therapy world. We just are kind of, in my opinion, sometimes we might be missing the mark as to where we want to put our emphasis. And so that type of stuff made a lot of sense. And then the last thing I'll mention is, in one of these podcasts, they showed one of the kind of foundational exercises that we teach in the program, and it's called a child rocker. And I happened to try it on a patient of mine, and within a few weeks, a symptom that I actually could not change at all, it was one last thing that we needed to change and to get rid of, it took it away. And that really blew my mind. I was like, what just happened? Something happened. I don't know what it was. And so seeing that take place was really profound for me. And I thought, okay, I got to learn a little bit more about this, because that is, something happened. One last note about that. As soon as he got up from that exercise, we both didn't know what to expect. We literally watched the video together. So my cueing was not great. He noticed a difference in how he was moving, and I had no ability to prompt him to do that. And so, there's really something to that when you can see somebody visibly change the way that they're loading and feel a difference. So those kind of led me down the path of exploring it more and knowing that, wow, I think I could really help my patients get better even faster. So that was a big moment for me.
Well, it makes sense. And David, I'll kick it over to you here in a second, but I was just thinking back through what fits you. One, it fits you because you are all about getting people better quickly and then educating them to understand their body. And so it made sense that when it clicked, you're like, if I can actually help to recover and heal somebody and educate somebody faster, not necessarily faster, but in the actual foundational way, it makes sense. It's always been a mission of yours. And you've always been open about that. Like, if I can get you feeling better in a matter of just a few visits, awesome. And so I'm sure that was a huge trigger for you. And then two, my wife and I actually went through just a foundational clinic with you, and the way your body completely, it just makes sense. Like the fact that, not to unlock the whole, what the whole initial meeting with you is like, but I know we were all sitting a certain way in the chair. We went through the strategic, like structural exercises, and you could feel like the posterior load. You could feel your body just almost like erecting. And then you go back and sit down, and everybody was sitting almost like more correctly because the body had actually turned on what should have turned on. So I thought that was fascinating. I know we could definitely elaborate on that, and we can kick it, but is there anything you want to speak to that before David kind of shares his reason for going after GOATA?
I think honestly, just starting with a couple things like we discussed in that workshop can have a profound effect on your body. And that's one of the, I think the really cool things about it is once you start to do some of these movements, you will literally feel like your body it craves that type of movement. It craves that type of activity. And you'll feel like, when I sit, I feel different, or naturally my feet want to be straighter. Whereas initially it feels so bizarre because you have trained your body to, be in a specific posture, for however long you've been doing it that way. So, I think it's really cool that you could automatically feel a difference just by decompressing your system.
Yeah. And then even walking up a hill this past weekend, and then just trekking several feet, not miles, but we were walking a lot this weekend. I felt myself like really consciously, tracking the way you taught us to actually walk, how we're supposed to walk.
That's cool. It's really neat. You'll feel, go ahead.
No, you're going to say, even one clinic with you, and like there's something about it, how it resonates. But anyway,
That's
but
awesome.
David, what about you? Where did you first learn about GOATA, and then what's got you really bought in at this point?
Yeah, so the timing that I found out about GOATA seamlessly came along with my son. So so getting to see him develop and start to crawl and then stand and kind of seeing that child development, because that's part of the GOATA origins. They looked at child development. They looked at indigenous tribes that don't have all the interventions of chairs and cars. And it's just basically the most natural and holistic style of living, and seeing the longevity that they have, seeing the resistant bodies that they have. So there was a disconnect from everything that we're doing in the gym. There's a disconnect of our movement patterns and how and how we move throughout life. And I think it drew me in because it made so much sense. It was looking at things in a holistic view. And the slow motion stuff was really neat because you get to see how when injuries are taking place, yeah, there were certainly trends on where inside ankle bone, it was collapsing, it was low, and there was never an injury when it was high. So there's like strengthening in those areas. And my background was in sports performance first. When I started training almost 10 years ago, it was in the sports performance field. We were training young athletes, and it wasn't pretty. Like there was a lot of movement that needed to be addressed in just that in that realm, but it was always the traditional types of lifting. It was what we grew up in, the strength world of deadlifts and squats and bench press, and saying that it's sports specific, and not really seeing it translate to the field necessarily. And I think I drew a line about 6 months ago when now I started transitioning to training more general population, people in their 30s, 40s and up, that they want to move better. They have some pains, they have some restrictions that they want to address. And they see the bigger why than just, I want to bench a lot or I want to look good. Like they have other substantial reasons. And I was really getting frustrated that they would do great in the gym. They would never get hurt. Everything was really strong form wise. And then they would throw out their back gardening, or they would clean something wrong. They would bend the wrong way. And they were just so fragile. So they were doing everything right in the gym, but there was a disconnect to strength when they're actually moving. And I explored around, and I was trying to find something that culminated all of those things. So seeing my son and him doing those child rockers, and I came across that first on like a YouTube video. I was like, wait a minute, my son does that. Why don't we do that now? Like, why is crawling not really a thing? And just seeing how it can assist with so much back pain, and I think Susan mentioned compression before. So like those are kind of the three pillars, right? It's maintaining that foot and that structure. It's the decompression and the head control. It's all these different milestones and checkpoints that GOATA uses to assess clients and making sure that they're prepared for the next thing. So it's not just let's throw this exercise because it's really fun to do. There is a system in place that you will stay on this base level until you graduated, and then you are able to do it. So I really enjoyed having a structure that looked into the individual and where they were, so that they were progressed correctly, and it wasn't just about reaching a certain weight goal or things like that. So I really bought into it, and I was doing it for myself first. And my back pain was going away. That's something I've struggled with since I was in college. And I have a couple, my older roommates will still text me. It's like, oh man, I regret going so heavy because my knees are shot and all these other things. I'm like, hey, I got a new method for you. You should try this one. And it's gone past the gimmick stage and all the skepticism of, okay, is this really legit? Because as Susan mentioned, some really high level people as practitioners are involved, and they buy in, they see that it makes sense. And I think sometimes we get so dogmatic about, this is the way to do it. This is what we've heard all throughout school. And sometimes we need to take a step back and be like, what am I seeing when I train somebody? And does that really align with what I'm being taught? Maybe there's something that I'm missing. So I was definitely interested to learn more, and I've loved the experience.
Yeah, I love hearing the kind of the stories of it. And it sounds like it's definitely being accepted a lot faster than I thought it would, and it makes sense because so many people. So thanks for sharing why. Kind of because y'all both went into it as technicians, practitioners, and like making sure you do the front end research before you apply it, to any of your practice, and then it just makes such logical sense when you see it and when you experience it. Even before my wife and I went to your workshop, even Melissa was like, same way. She's athletic trainer, by trade, and all these things has been taught. And she was like, I just don't know. And then after like 2 movements, she was like, okay, this is already making sense now. Versus visually, which you do a great job of, like, especially for the general population, to see why and what that means. And you always show video of your daughter running, which I love seeing the parallels of those. So I love the fact that both it really kind of sunk in with y'all even more so because of your children, which I thought was super cool.
Yeah, I mean, the body awareness that have is incredible. Like you mentioned when you were hiking, you're just so hyper aware of foot placement, where your butt is, and it's just incredible to see how that translates to just everyday living.
Yeah, since we're in that vein, Susan, do you want to kind of take over a little bit more? I mean, you can elaborate on what we're at if you want to, but I was going to kind of transition a little bit more to our daily habits, behaviors, compressive and decompressive. But if you have something else to share, go ahead.
No, absolutely. Well, kind of along that same lines of, you mentioned, like, sometimes I'll show my daughter. So my oldest is 6 and my youngest is 4. And, I never taught my kids how to sit or how to rest. And they rest in these resting postures all of the time on the ground. And what's fascinating is they'll naturally get into them. They'll naturally move when they need to. And so even as a 6-year-old, she's still doing them on a daily basis. And so my goal is to keep her doing those. But those habits of sitting and resting on the ground and how she is sitting, right? They actually help create a sense of suppleness and a good mobility in our hips. If anybody has ever tried, like, sitting on their knees in a SOZO position where your toes are facing inward and the heels are facing away, and we could probably get a picture of that. We can pop it in here if you want. That amount of flexibility required to do that is actually a lot. And there are certain cultures that maintain that kind of flexibility throughout their life because they always do it. One culture in particular, like the Japanese culture, they spend a lot of time on the ground. They rest in that position a lot, indigenous people, but you'll see kids doing that. And so if we can keep our kids rested on the ground, doing our homework on the ground, like, that's a huge win. And we actually went to a puppet show over the weekend, and there's a bunch of small kids there. And I watched a lot of the kids hang out in these same resting postures, and they would switch out every couple of minutes. They're moving. And, it's not, I think about it, they're not moving because they're antsy. They're moving because they're like, I got to switch up my position, right? And you look at all the parents, and they're all kind of slumped over. It can't get into these postures that are actually going to help them maintain a certain amount of flexibility and strength too, right? Like, as you age, it's a lot harder to get off the ground. But if you rest on the ground, you're always getting stronger by literally just having to do that all the time. And so I know I'm kind of maybe getting a little off tangent, but the way you rest and the way you stand has a profound effect on how you move, because those same positions that you're going to see in the stance and in the sit are going to take place as you move. And, in GOATA, we're really looking for an open, like a straight foot and a really open landing. And so if we rest in those postures, it's a lot easier to get because we need proper mobility in our hip and our ankle. And I can also give you a couple examples of some pictures of what that would look like too. But yeah, that it really plays a big role in our how we move.
No, it makes so much sense. And I was just trying to think back through, again, going back through it foundationally, and even like the bow and the leg, and then as far as like foot placement and how to, it's just amazing to me. I'll find myself, if we're standing for a long period of time or whatnot, and I'm out and about, and the low back will start to hurt. And then immediately when I adjust my feet to how I'm supposed to be standing, according to the structure, you can feel the decompression kind of go away. It's like the body reloads on itself. I know it's a little bit hard to kind of portray without all the visuals, but I also think it's good for people to kind of hear it and kind of try to visualize it as we go through. But and then again, as far as like, I guess what's really the ultimate goal when you first start with someone? What's your ultimate goal from like the structure up, and then also trying to get the body, the muscles to engage differently compared to how we're naturally just at this at this stage of our lives, kind of detrained basically.
Yeah. So our first initial goal is to just kind of get an idea of what's your baseline, right? Like, how are you moving right now? Maybe what are the things that are bothering you? What are your goals? And then the first thing that we do is give an awareness to your posture. So literally dialing into what does it look like to load your joints, even in standing, in a way that your body is wired to move. So making some corrections in the way that you're standing, just having that awareness, just like how you have a better awareness of how you're placing your feet and what muscles are getting activated. If we could start to correct how you're resting, and whether that be standing or sitting, you will start to decompress your body just by way of getting yourself out of that position. And then we also will implement usually like 3 or 4 exercises that you're going to do a couple times a day to help promote that decompression. Because, at the end of the day, if you've got a lot of tightness, it's not just going to be enough to stand with your feet straight. If they're not used to that, and you really can't pull off some of the look without some of these exercises to really hone in and get rid of some of the sticky spots that you have. And so, it really starts with decompressing and body awareness, and then teaching, better ways to rest, not just in chairs, but, spending a little bit more time on the ground, and finding ways to plug it in to have it be natural. When I first worked with my GOATA coach, he told me, I want you to do this for 30 to 60 minutes throughout the day. And I thought, that seems ludicrous. And I bet I rest on the ground several hours a day now.
Yeah.
It's just like a natural way that I have changed my habits.
Yeah.
So
and it makes sense. And I know it's always funny when you start to tell people about, like, I need to help you understand how to rest first. And there's so much in our brains with other trainings of activity, or we need to go do the actual movements of engagement. But I forgot already that, not today, but until you reminded me that's your biggest things first. It's like you need to relearn
rest and
how to rest
and walk. Sorry, that was the other big piece. Like just honing in on some key a few cues to help you load your body in a more appropriate way, because a lot of people are very used to a specific, like that, the inside of their foot having a lot of load, and pushing off the inside of their foot. And really, you're going to get better engagement if you start to push off the outside corner. So just giving them a few cues to help with that walk is very helpful.
Yeah, I think that's huge. What about, got a couple minutes, David, on this one, but what about you as far as what's kind of your application at this point with GOATA, at least with your clients?
Yeah, well, I think because the way I train is primarily in-home and online, where there's limits in their equipment that they have access to. So that's another reason why GOATA was such a seamless transition for us, because it's heavily body weight or band resistance or light dumbbells. You really don't need a ton of equipment. You can always progress it when you're able, but for the most part, it's very minimal for equipment purposes. So when everything that Susan said was spot on. I like the training sessions are almost like almost to whet your palate, because it is a lifestyle change. This is not just, hey, I'm going to work out twice a week doing these moves and see change. This is something where once they have the foundation and they buy into it, because that's key. It can't just be Susan agrees with it and I agree with it and Cody agrees with it. You as a client need to say, I understand why this is going to help, and I'm going to put the time in to do it. And during that training session, it's a lot of education and instruction to make sure that they are learning how to almost coach themselves and feel it in the right spots. get that engagement so that when they do start to do those movements, the resting positions at home, they're feeling it correctly and they can start to make the changes needed to give themselves a break, because you can't jump all in. This is something where you need to do it slowly, especially if you're pretty deconditioned from it. You're 50, 60 years old, getting off the lounge chair and going onto the floor is not going to be comfortable. So there's stages that you can do it in, and there's, giving yourself some grace to do it for a couple minutes, like a minute, it's okay. It's just getting that initial step. But yeah, that mindfulness and that awareness of your body has been huge. And thankfully I have a wife that's super supportive and is as all in as I am, where she was like, all right, we're moving the couch into this room. The living room is now just all ground sitting. So even if you wanted to get lazy and be comfortable for a minute, you can.
Wow,
so,
that's amazing, David.
Yeah, so it's been fun. So now the living room is just a playroom with mats, and Luke is having a ball. But yeah, I really think it is a lifestyle switch, and that's been my biggest takeaway from all the GOATA work.
No, I've loved seeing the progression of it, for sure. And it just foundationally makes so much sense once you get it. Well, let's go ahead and jump to Susan, if you're open to it. Again, this is hard to do a whole just discovery, in a half an hour. So I want to make sure we got some oversight, and then make sure, people can follow up with you guys later with more questions. And we can always, if more people want, we can do more elaborative, follow-up video with demonstrations and things like that. If you'd open to it, I know we all like demos, for sure, by nature. I'm surprised Susan hadn't jumped on the ground and started showing you guys stuff already.
I thought about it.
I know, I could see. But so for the second time, let's go ahead, and if we have a few more minutes left over, awesome. But let's go ahead and jump to like a couple of examples or some clients that you've had, Susan, that you've seen a big impact that GOATA had on just in their life in general.
Yeah, I'll kind of go through. I'll touch on like 3 people and kind of 3 different age ranges, so that you can kind of get a feel for how this can help with people in all lifespans. So I have a 12-year-old who came to me because of knee pain and did a lot of extra training, doing a lot of calisthenic work. And it seemed to actually be getting worse with the trainer that she was working with. She does a couple different sports. And when we did our assessment, lots of compression on her landing, needs some work. And a few weeks in, knee pain's gone. Her mechanics are getting better. But that's the cool thing about GOATA, is that often, even when your mechanics are not up to on your journey, right? If there's going to be different levels of how you transition and change, you can feel tremendous differences in how you feel before the look is like where we want it to be. So, you got your athlete, and she had 0 downtime from her, playing sports. And so pain-free in a few weeks from doing these movements. Awesome. And exercises. Yep. And then I had, somebody in their 30s who hip pain with a lot of standing. He noticed literally within a day or 2 of doing it, he's like, I forgot. I normally, when I stand for long periods of time, my hip would hurt, and it doesn't hurt anymore, So, that's that age range. And I had a lot of athletes, like runners, who are training for marathons or halves or Spartan races, and they'd hit these blocks at few miles, and either their knees go shot, their feet, their hips, and they're running the races now, which is huge when they haven't been able to, their body hasn't been able to stand that. And then I have, my oldest client was 78, and when he did it, he said it literally changed his life, which was really cool, because he had some limitations in his mobility that were not allowing him to do some of the stuff that he wanted to do. And, at the end of our work together, he's like, this changed my life. So it's really cool to see it work for everybody. It looks different for every single person. We kind of tailor it towards what somebody needs. But it's amazing to see the same foundational principles carry through no matter what age you are.
Yeah, it's also great, I think, to see it in real time when you do a workshop and you're actually able to see how it impacts everybody together. I think that may have been one of the added sensories for myself and for like Melissa, was the fact that you were in a room full of discovery. Everybody was discovering new, and you could see how they were limited here and then how you adjusted.
Yeah.
It was really, it's a lot of fun to have that as a collective. You know, it's always fun with you and individual and trainer, therapist implementing it, but to do it as a group was a neat experience, to be honest.
Yeah, it's really probably one of the most humbling things you'll do is a narrow squat, which we call it the access squat. And it is the true test of how much compression or decompression you have in your system. And so it's really fun to kind of see everybody understand how flexible or not flexible they are, right?
Yeah.
And so we did that in there. That was really fun. And I find that just getting people to feel and experience movement and understand how, like, that's not supposed to be like that. It can be really profound. So thanks.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And of course. And then David, I know you probably have to jump off here in a minute, but did you have any kind of lingering testimonials or just things that are people that you've seen it impact?
So just two that jump out is a 17-year-old swimmer who has scoliosis, and a 67, I believe he is now, year old golfer. You know, he wants to go out, and when the weather's nice, he'll be out there every time. And you know, he was obviously working on some rotation and swings, but he was standing like this, so his left shoulder was way lower than the right, and there were all these things just from a foundation standpoint being able to correct, to where now he's like, David, I'm getting 10 more yards on my driver, I'm doing this much better. Or you know, the 17-year-old, they're just seeing the changes with his scoliosis and his back pain, to where he's doing his events and he's not in pain as much. You know, it's really making him an efficient mover. You know, there's no wasted time. He's being able to get that transition from one side to the next. It's quicker. And I think that's the biggest thing, that whether you're 67 years old just trying to just function, let alone play golf, versus a kid that's just trying to get that next step for college or whatever it may be, these are those little things that go a long way. Because when you get into those levels and you're just looking for any added edge, why not do this when you can really look into a slow motion tape and see, hey, this is where you're wasting time here. This is where you're not pushing off and creating the right pressure in this right area. Let's tinker this a little bit, keep retraining it, and then you'll be moving in a so much better way.
I love hearing it. Yeah, I wish we could talk more about this forever. So thank y'all for taking the time to really kind of share more about this. We'll go maybe 5 more minutes. Again, David, if you know, I'm not trying to kick you off, but if you need to go, totally up to you. Just give me a wave. I'll see you out. And then, but yeah, I think my last 2 questions really was, why do we feel like, and y'all had good points on this, why do we feel like this hasn't been discussed sooner, or like the GOATA trajectory sooner? And then just how do you maybe foresee it impacting really health and wellness moving forward, now that it is a part of, you know, just the rhetoric of actual well care. But yeah, why do you think it hasn't been discussed sooner? And then what do you see for the future of it?
So I think that the implementation of the phone, like the iPhone, being able to slow things down actually really helped, because it enabled you to scrub movement and really see what was going on frame by frame. And that's where all of this is in the details, especially when you're first starting to learn. Once you have the awareness, then you can see it in everybody. But yeah, so I think that really helped. And then I also think that there are times that we will tend to compartmentalize our studies a little bit too much. And so we're not really looking at, like, what does it look like on the whole? Like, really what's happening from the foot all the way up to the head when we're moving. And then also compartmentalizing, right? Like really honing in on not just what are people doing as a whole. It's like, what are the stable people doing as a whole? What are like the people who are not getting hurt? And I think that like actually studying those super movers, if you will, the people who have more of the blueprint, that's when you get to see like, oh my gosh, this looks totally different than the way I'm moving. And when I got my video taken, it was incredibly humbling because I thought I was going to be the one who's like, oh yeah, you got it. You know, I do all these events. Like I'm okay. Yeah. I mean, I was humbled to say the least at my movement. So yeah, I think just, we haven't been, and we've also really, in at least in my world and the physical therapy world, we've honed in a lot on the hip and have like placed a lot of emphasis on the fact that our hip is controlling the knee, which is controlling the foot, and instead of thinking of it in the reverse order as in like, the foot is really laying the foundation and then it's setting the stage for what's happening. So just studying almost like the wrong area, and sometimes having somebody come in from the outside world and taking a fresh look and being like, there might be a pattern here. And I really haven't seen anybody break out movement the way GOATA has. And it, just like how David's touched on, like it made sense. And when something makes logical sense, like, and it has a system to it that's repeatable, like I can get more on board with that because now I can like implement that and see what happens. And I think the most amazing thing about like assessing people through video is that the video just doesn't lie. I cannot make you any better. The video will not change unless we change your movement and we change your strength and stability. And so when you can see somebody go from having a collapsed foot, a collapsed knee, the hip getting pulled forward, to having a straight foot, a really nice support, and then, you know, having like the hip, the knee come out a little bit, it's amazing to see somebody totally transform their movement and then also feel better, move better, and they often like their performance just naturally improves. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, again, it's like you're basically uncoding how we're wired. I do find it kind of almost interesting, a little bit funny that we always talk about the kinetic chain, and why would the kinetic chain start from the knee or the hip upward? Why wouldn't it start from the source of impact or the source of gravity, you know, or load in general?
Yeah. And I mean, you know, in PT school, like the gait cycle was taught a very different way. And even where you put pressure and loaded, and we like divvied out supination and pronation and all these things. And I do love that. So the GOATA system is very simple and complex at the same time. And so when you can like actually see these things take place frame by frame, it just gives you so much evidence. You know what I mean? Like that's the biggest thing. It's like, wow, you can actually see all this take place, and there's a lot of harmony to it. And it really all, it's this pressure wave. You know, you go from like loading pressure on one side to transferring it to the other. And when there's disharmony in the system, it can throw off like everything up the chain. So
well, two quick things on that, and then we can kind of just shut her down, I guess. But you know, I think about how, you know, your like you said, your thought process of why it took a while is just nobody has really took the time to decode it using such slow movement, you know, video analysis. And I think I mentioned to you about how I was always fascinated with it 10, 15 years ago when Dartfish come out, and you had all these other ones that were, you know, programs that were sport specific athletes, you know, but they were really tracking like, are you know, what's your lever like on your squat, or if you move in this way, are you going to have a internal valgus maneuver, those types of things. But then to leverage technology into studying the body, how it's naturally, you know, supposed to move. But like to paint a picture for you guys listening or watching that may haven't been a part or been assessed yet, or hadn't had the privilege of meeting with Susan in person, is it is very eye-opening once she does her, you know, once you do your series of movements, and then to get that feedback. I think you had our feedback to us just within a day or two with the joint angles and with each one. What are the main ones you use to take people through when you're doing the video assessment?
Yeah, so we normally do a squat. Well, we assess your posture forward, side, back. We do a squat. So your squat is going to give us a really good read on how your landing is going to look. So we know that if you can't squat deep or your feet are getting splayed out, your landing is probably going to mimic that. And then we do like a forward hinge or like bending over as far as you can. And that's going to give us some good read on what it's going to look like to actually push off and transfer your energy. So, and we call that the corner. Yeah. And then we will assess your walk and your run and standing on one foot. And they all give us some good information as to how you are not only accepting low, but then transferring it. And we really break down the gait cycle and see what's happening at the foot level and all the way up. I mainly will focus on like hips down to start, because people get there's so many details to it, but yeah, so that's kind of what we'll take a look at. And like I mentioned, it's very humbling, and
oh, yeah.
you went through it too.
Oh, so I went through it. I knew it was going to be a mess after the first 10 minutes of, yeah. It's funny when somebody walks into the room, because you don't hide expressions very well. So you're already, you're analyzing people to their benefit, though. It's not a critique or a judgment. It's like, I'm here to help.
Yes. Yes.
Well, awesome. Well, I'm excited. I'm very grateful for you taking the time to do this. I guess to wrap up, is there anything else that you think would be good to kind of add to for people maybe learning about GOATA for the first time? So anything you'd like to add to or take away, and then any sources that you think are good for people to start researching more on it?
Yeah. So I'll just say, like, just to kind of follow it all up, as human beings, we are made to move. We are locomotive beings. And so what I find so amazing about this system is that everything we're doing, just like David mentioned, we're training behavior, we're training like a pattern of movement. Everything we do is in an attempt to not only decompress, but like actually strengthen and load in a way that is going to be beneficial for you. And so if you are an athlete and you are wanting to get a little bit more of that competitive edge, I think it's a great tool. I've never been a huge lifter of weights, and I am stronger. I have lifted weights, but I'm stronger than I ever have been. And, some of the movements, although we're not adding as much weight as maybe you're used to, I can kick like an athlete's booty on some of these movements because they can't get the activation. Right. And, even when they'll go back to their gym and they'll be like, yeah, somehow I just started squatting like 25 pounds heavier within a week of doing this. And I'm like, well, that's because you now have access to muscle activation and mobility, that you didn't have before. So I think that like, it's a great tool for athletes. It's great for people, and like in the 30s, 40s, 50s, just like looking for longevity. I just got done with a patient right before here, and we're going to follow up in a month. And she's like, every time I come, I just learn something new. And she's not even a GOATA client. We do some GOATA stuff in it, but she loves learning more about how she's going to create a stable environment for her to like transition into the later part of her years, and I think that it's really cool to be able to train in a way that's training for longevity and durability. And I haven't seen any other system do that to this effect. No. And get you really strong and toned. So I would not shy away, because it's not as sexy, as David said, as some of the other stuff. It can get really fun once you learn some of the movements. So
you just unlock new, and you learn more about your body. And I think that's what a lot of us really want. We're already, earlier today I did a podcast on more of the behavioral psychological. So now it's like to really study and learn more about your body, and don't allow yourself to accept how you are now. Like once you go through some of this type of movement and training, it's interesting because your body will reconnect to how you were as a child. Like when you're in certain positions, you have flashbacks, memories of how you used to sit like this, why you used to sit like this, how you used to feel back then. It's a much deeper impact, I think.
It is. Yeah. And as far as some places to go for resources, I think GOATAMovement.com is a great place to start. They also have some their Instagram, which I think is GLS_training. You can go to mine. It is PT in Motion TN. I talk about GOATA and some other physical therapy related points there as well. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'd start. Is you could find them on YouTube if you Google GOATA and YouTube, or you would find a ton of stuff.
Right, and you do like email newsletters and stuff now too, right? Does that apply?
Yep.
Yeah. So go to your website to sign up for that, I guess. Subscribe.
Yeah, it's pt-inmotion.com. So
I love it. Well, I'm excited. No, I appreciate this very much. I hope everybody listening or watching, we'd love to get your feedback, what your thoughts on it. If you've learned some new things, if you want us to kind of expound on it more, we'd definitely love to. I know Susan is very passionate about it because it's just impacting people so much. But anything we can do to be an advocate for it, let us know. I think there's probably more of our trainers that are going to be more interested in understanding GOATA more as we unlock all these things and understandings of it. But appreciate your time.
Maybe next time we'll do a couple exercises. We'll do a little workshop.
No, I think it's awesome. Maybe I just need to come up there and we can do it in person in real time, which would be fun.
That would be a blast. You'll get analyzed, Cody. Well, everybody will be.
Yeah. Well, I'm not scared. Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. We'll talk to you soon.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay. Sounds good. We'll see you, Cody. Bye.